When I first started redesigning Five Nights at Freddy's characters, I was asked if I was willing to redesign characters from franchises other than FNAF. And someone specifically asked if I would ever redesign a Pokemon character. I never gave a clear answer because I didn't know what kind of rabbit hole that would open up. I was already struggling attempting to redesign over 200 Five Nights at Freddy's characters, and I didn't want to set a precedent that I'd be willing to redesign one of the over 1,000 Pokemon. Especially when I really only like 3. But then a favorite YouTuber of mine, a New Zealander named Radical Soda, made a video where he envisioned what Pokemon would be in a New Zealand-themed region. And that inspired me to try and design Pokemon that hailed from my own neck of the woods, the New England area. But then I realized that Pokemon already did New York in one of the games, so it'd be a little redundant to do Boston, right? But then, a brilliant idea came to me. So many parts of the world are kind of left out of the Pokemon franchise because their countries have never been represented in a game. So what if I gave a Pokemon to every country on the planet? And then I realized, wait, there are 190 plus countries. That's gonna take way too long for a video. So I slimmed it down a little bit. So I decided to give each continent its own Pokemon. But a continent's according to me. I don't want to get into a geography rant or anything, but I feel like terms that describe the entire planet should be inclusionary instead of exclusionary, which is why I don't use terms like first and third world. So instead of the modern conception of continents, where somehow Lebanon and South Korea are part of the same continent, I divided them up into smaller, cultural continents. And they're each gonna get their own Pokemon. Or more specifically, an Eeveelution. If you aren't aware, Eevee is a special Pokemon where, depending on what kind of item you give it, it'll evolve into a different Pokemon. And normally in the games, that consists of some sort of special gemstone imbued with one of the elements. But here, what if you gave an Eevee a culturally important artifact and it evolved into a form representative of that region? Let's find out, why don't we? So, before I begin, I just want to say I'm not the world's biggest Pokemon statistician. These designs were created more so with their cultural relevance in mind and not so their stats. Their stats were like an afterthought. But I did check up with a friend of mine who is a big Pokemon fan, and they told me most of my ideas were kind of shit, which is why I like them. They're honest. These aren't meant to be played in competitive or even balanced. I just want to draw little funny little guys. With that out of the way, let's start with our first continent. And why don't we start with the continent humanity started on? Going clockwise around the continent, our first stop is the North African desert. And I feel like in a lot of media, there's really only two things the Sahara Desert is really known for. Camels traveling through the sand, and ancient Egypt shit. It's definitely an underappreciated part of the world. Especially when we have a lot to thank the Sahara for. For instance, games. Like in general. One of the first board games ever created was a favorite amongst the ethnic Tuareg in this region. And that game is Mancala. Admittedly, the origins of Mancala are a bit hard to trace, and it was more likely made in the Levant, but hey, it was also played in North Africa, and I thought it would be fun anyway to commemorate the region with the rock psychic type, Moncalion. Obviously, their long, slender body is meant to look like a Mancala board. They got all the little gem pieces, and they're green, because that's the color of Islam. And their hat is also very Islamic. Although I gave the star 4 points just because at that angle it would have been a pentagram, and that's a no-no. The cultural artifact that evolves them, I wrote down that it was a scroll, but more specifically, it's a scroll from the library of the city of Timbuktu, Yes, Timbuktu is a real city, but it's pronounced a little different. I was gonna have this scroll originally be a Quran, but that's a little too religious, so maybe it's a scroll that teaches you how to play Mancala. And for their moves, they got a special move called Gem Bank, which this is a stupid idea I had for a move. I wanted to incorporate the strategy of Mancala into a Pokemon battle, so Gem Bank as a move, it would give the Pokemon with the most health a buff on all stats, even if that wasn't you. So, and it's also really slow too, so you had to bait the enemy into either using another status move or not healing or not attacking you, and just kind of predict when they're not going to attack you, so you'll know when you'll have the most health. I've been told this move can be very broken, but fuck it. Next up, we got East Africa, and I knew going into this I was going to make at least one of them a lion. I love lions. I arguably am one. But I knew I had to give it a gimmick. It couldn't just be a lion. There are already a lot of Pokemon that are just lions. So this is Netronion. He's named after Lake Netron. It's a naturally occurring body of pure alkaline. It's actually kind of terrifying because when birds roost in it, they don't look this up, but their internal organs get emulsified and they turn into shale skeletons. Yeah, it turns out undiluted alkaline is poisonous, which is why they're a poison electric type. Also, if you wanted to divorce these designs from being Eeveelutions, you could name this one Alkalion. That's also a very good idea. It's a pretty simple design, just a lion with I like the skeleton tail as a reference to the horrible fate to animals that roost in Lake Netron, and the varicose veins. This is simple, but it's actually kind of one of my favorites. You'll see that the artifact that evolves them is Netron water, which is boring, but I literally couldn't think of anything else. Well, I could. I was going to have it originally be a beret because Paul Kagame, president of Rwanda, is famous for wearing one of those, but so many of the other artifacts that evolve these Eeveelutions are hats that I didn't want to make it another hat. Now, I know I said we were going around the continent clockwise, but I forgot how I actually named the files, so next up is actually West Africa, not South. West Africa, I think, is the most representative of the continent in the minds of foreigners. And I don't remember properly, but I think this is actually the first region I started with when making these designs. It's definitely the first idea I had, because this is Kalakion. They're based on both an Ika Kalaka sword, which, for you video game nerds in the back who aren't necessarily history nerds, the Doomslayer's Crucible sword in Doom Eternal, it's basically the same thing. But they're an Ika Kalaka sword combined with a voodoo doll. Now, I know voodoo's a touchy subject because of how stereotyped it is, but I did do a lot of research into it, enough to know that it's actually spelled V-O-D-U-N. And most voodoo spirits aren't actually malicious. They're just mechanical parts of the universe. Which is why I opted to make Kalakion a ghost type instead of a dark type, since in Japan, dark type is actually the evil type. Gameplay-wise, I guess they'd be like a weird combination of like Aegis Slash and Wobbuffet, maybe. And the artifact that evolves them is a Kufi. It's a type of hat from this region. Expect a lot more hats going forward. But other than that, I mean, it's a sword cat. What else could you want? Alright, now we get to talk about Southern Africa. And honestly, I had a hard time creating a good design for this region. I mean, instantly I knew with how universally known this part of the world is for their diamonds, I had to make it rock type. But I really didn't have that, like, good concept I did for, like, other parts of the world. But then something hit me. So 2 of the countries in this region are Botswana and Lesotho. And their names are actually very special because, much like how the names Finland mean land of the Finns and Afghanistan means land of the Afghans, these names also have that kind of significance. And I thought, hey, wait a minute. Aren't there Pokemon like Maushold and Phalanx that are multiple creatures, but they're still considered one single Pokemon? What if I did that for this Eeveelution? So say hi to the little guys, aka Balanion. I already basically explained the name. It's the plurality terms from Botswana and Lesotho. But their faces, they actually have little face paint under their eyes, which is a reference to the face paint worn by cultures in this region. They have coats and big fluffy tails covered in diamonds because that's a big export of this region. And they got little headbands, which is also the item that evolves them. These specific scarves, I think, are called Dooku scarves. I'm getting it from a website called africafabs.com, so, I mean, if that's not a primary source, I don't know what is. And you may have noticed their stats. So, when the columns are blue, that's the maximum, and, yeah, these fuckers are dense and fast. And their signature move, Catapult, is when you just fucking throw them at the enemy. I thought this would be something here. I
really can't believe.
Oh! Yeah! Shit! Out of all designs I did, these are definitely the most Eevee-like, and they're definitely the silliest little guys. And the next continent up is Asia. The one continent nobody can agree on where it begins or ends, or how big is it, or what countries are a part of it. Yeah, there's a reason I demarcated my own mini-continents before doing this. Speaking of which, the next cultural continent is the Middle East. This design was also one of the ones I was picturing in my head when I was just, lying on my bed envisioning what designs I could make for this video. Because for the Middle Eastern Eeveelution, I decided to make them a dark water type. Now tell me, what substance looks like dark water and is related to the Middle East? That's right, ink! Our next Eeveelution is Calligrion, based on Arabic calligraphy. Basically think Smeargle, except less finger painting and more artisanal handwriting. Their design is pretty minimalist, but there are a lot of subtle nuances in it. The white patterns on their head are vaguely based off the types of burqas and other veils women wear, with the white representing the eye hole that's in the cloth. The eyes are green because, again, color of Islam. The ears are like very wavy and wispy like a poodle because I want that like cloth texture of a burqa to be really implied here. And of course, the body is completely covered in calligraphy. Now, I can't actually read Arabic, and even if I did, I wanted this to be more Laurel Ipsum text. It doesn't actually mean anything like real calligraphy does. I wrote down that the artifact that evolves them is an art brush, because their tail is one too, but I actually kind of don't like that. I think I'd rather it be something like a Hamsa or a Nazar or some kind of other pendant. But that was really my only issue with the design, and that's more of a lore thing anyway. And besides, this design was always the favorite amongst my friends when I was just workshopping these designs before the video came out. And so, obviously, I can't make changes to the fan favorite, right? And since we're actually going clockwise this time, next up is the Indian Peninsula. And whilst India is the big powerhouse country here, I didn't want to create a design that excluded any of the smaller nation states. And after Fallout 3's controversy, I didn't want to draw too much upon Hindu religious symbolism. As cool as I think that culture is, it's just a little bit bad taste to base a Pokemon off it. So I looked instead to the wildlife of this region, and I found this creature called the Zebu. It's this cow-looking thing, but I found this specific image of one, and I really like the way the horns were curved in. I imagined in my head that like there was a little laser beam going in between them, like they were big Tesla coils or something. I mostly said that as a joke to myself, but then I thought about how cool it would be if that was a psychic type. So here's Zebodion. Obviously they're a Zebu, but also I combine them with a Bodhi tree, which is a prominent symbol in Buddhism. And that's where they get their secondary typing grass from. So now the big lump on the Zebu's back, it has a Bodhi tree symbol on it. and the root pattern is going all across their back. But to more or less tie this to India, I decided to put the two symbols that have been on the Indian flag on this design too. So obviously there's the Ashoka's wheel, which is what's on their modern flag, but also their tail has this line on it, this line connecting it to the back, which actually is meant to make it look like a silk wheel, which was on their flag during the independence movement. And that's why one of their abilities is named a silk wheel, which is, I think in my head, the way that move works is when you put them on the battlefield, you have to wait 5 turns for them to get a big defense boost, as if they're like achieving enlightenment over time. That's silly, but it's Pokemon. Next, we got Southeast Asia, and this is another one of the designs where it was one of the ones I had a concept for in the first batch when I was just debating whether or not I should even make this video. Because one of my favorite fun facts about this region is that Singapore, the country, has a mascot. Yeah, the government just made up their own mythical creature called the Merlion, and you'll see it in like different tourism offices and like public squares, often as like a fountain or something. So the Singaporean government has an OC, and I just love that. That fills me with so much joy that that's something that exists. So, of course, I had to make Merlion. Except I don't think Pokemon could legally do this because there's like certain copyrights surrounding the Merlion, but this is all just for fun. I'm not saying these should actually be added to a real game. So the design, obviously it's a Merlion, but with how very entrenched in specifically Singapore that is, I wanted to basically give other countries some representation in it. So on its belly, it has the Filipino sun. The staff that's holding is based off the flag of Brunei. And its crown is meant to look like a stylized version of the Angkor Wat, which is a prominent temple in Cambodia that's also on their flag. The artifact that evolves them is a Songkok, which is a type of hat in this region. You put a hat on your Eevee again. And they got a special ability named Spratly Defender, which the move probably works by like every time you get hit by an attack, it boosts your defense or something. But the name is specifically named after the Spratly Islands, which is a currently contested region in Southeast Asia. I am also just now realizing that this is the second lion I have in this lineup, but at least the colors are opposite, so... and keeps that from being repetitive, at least. And the next region is Polynesia, which is, yeah, a fusion of Micronesia, Melanesia, and Polynesia. And as I said at the beginning of this video, this was inspired by Radical Soda, who made, in his video, he made New Zealand-themed Pokemon. So I stayed away from both Australia and New Zealand and wanted to focus on the Pacific Islands. Because I feel like outside of Hawaii, the Pacific Island nations are really underloved. They're not even on most maps. Which, I mean, that sucks because I'd argue the Federated States of Micronesia is one of America's best allies. So to commemorate the people of this region, I gave them a Pokemon, which is better than an apology. This is Yapsion, based on the Yapsi or Rye stones that can be found all across the Pacific Islands. They are the world's largest currency, and I think they were used by the Melanesians and Polynesians. So Yapsion is wearing a big rock around his neck like cats wear those donut pillows. You know what I'm talking about, you've seen it before. Anyways, he also has, the patterns are based on flags. I know there's a lot of flag-based ones in this region, but these countries have such beautiful flags, I kind of wanted to incorporate them. So the ears are based on the Marshall Islands. He's got a dot representing Palau, and that wavier texture is representing Kiribati. And his signature move, Rye Roll, is when, you know when those big tires that are made for you to push children down a hill, not made for that, but it's basically that. He gets into a big rye stone and rolls at the opponent. This was a hard one to come up with a good shape for. I think I still have the sketch for alternative designs, and they're all kind of fucking stupid and hilarious. I'm glad I went with this one instead of those. And now we're on to the continent all the weebs in the back have been waiting for, East Asia. And since Pokemon itself is from Japan, this is the one design that I kind of ruminated a lot on. I knew with how cat-like Eevees are, I thought the Eeveelution for Asia should be a tiger because of how prominent tigers are in both Siberia, China, and Japan. But then my friend Maddie, I mentioned her at the beginning, she brought up a really good idea that I should base it off the 4 auspicious beasts and make it like a Draconiquest-esque fusion of the 4 of them. So this is Auspicion. Obviously from design you can tell what the 4 auspicious beasts are if you didn't already know. They're the black tortoise of the north, the white tiger of the west, vermilion bird of the south, and azure dragon of the east. And specifically I based the dragon part off the flag of King China because, well, pictures of real dragons are a bit hard to come across. I couldn't really find any in my research. But speaking of dragons, they are dragon type, and every other Eeveelution has been dual type, which is rare for Eeveelutions, but this is the only monotype one, and you might be wondering why. Well, this is actually my pitch for a dragon type Eeveelution, because I see dragon type not just as winged lizard type, I see it as more of a mythology beast type. And I think even creatures like ogres or vampires should also kind of constitute under dragon type. The artifact that evolves them, I was usually going to have it be a kimono, which is, boring. So, but then I remembered there's this in-joke amongst Japanese school students that the Japanese flag isn't a red sun and a white sky. It's actually a pickled plum in a bowl of rice, and that is just such a charming, silly, in-joke to me that I made the stone that evolves your Eevee into a dragon type a pickled plum. It's just a silly Pokemon thing. Oh, and speaking of Pokemon things, child kidnapping. Yeah, they got a special move called Lead Astray, which will make a Pokemon disappear out of the battle if they're in the red in their health, because it wouldn't be a Pokemon video if one of them didn't kidnap children. I don't know why that's a Pokemon thing, but fuck it, I need to continue the tradition. And the final part of Asia before we have to... Oh my fucking god, this bridge is fuck up. I can't fucking stay how loud you are. The final part of Asia is Central Asia because of how we snake through the continent. In my experience talking to non-history nerds, this is the area of the world people know the least about. They might know that there are some post-Soviet Union nations here, but that's probably it. So despite how fascinating it is, the history of Central Asia tends to get very underlooked. So why not bring that history to the forefront with an Eevee based on a historical figure? This is Timurian, based on Amir Shunja al-Timur, aka Tamerlane, the founder of the Timurid Emirate. He was an Uzbeki warlord, and when the Ilkhanate, a remnant of the Mongol Empire in modern-day Iran, when that nation fell apart and split apart into multiple different fledgling states, he brutally conquered them all. Yeah, he killed a lot of people, almost 4% of the Earth's population. I know what you're thinking. Great inspiration for a character in a children's game. That aside, it's obviously meant to look like Tamerlane, or what historical accounts we have of his appearance. And the colors are of the flag of the Timurid Empire. The tail actually is meant to look like a horse because Timur and every other warlord in Central Asia were horse riders. The artifact that evolves them is, it says it's a rug, but specifically it's a Turkmeni rug. The Turkmeni people have a very heavy rug culture where they have all these distinct patterns for different ethnic groups. I mean, Timur wasn't Turkmeni, he was Uzbeki, but I always want to include multiple different regions in these designs, even if it's just through lore. He has a special move called Horrify, which would probably be an all-around stat debuff. And his special ability, Legacy of Fear, is something I will talk about later, actually. It makes more sense to talk about it when talking about another Pokemon special ability. Alright, Europe time. And this is actually going to be a lot quicker since I only divided up Europe into 3 cultural continents. Continuing our journey from Central Asia, why don't we start with Eastern Europe? Admittedly, it is harder to find more unifying concepts in Europe because of how actively combative and influential the states around here are. But one weird consistent through line through most Eastern European countries is that despite being modern democracies, they all still venerate their 11th and 12th century kings. Like, just a small example, currency. Most Western nations have relatively recent elected officials on their banknotes. But then in Eastern Europe, you got like the 20 Serbia dinar, which has Peter II on it from the 1800s. 3 of the people on Russian rubles are former monarchs. Every single denomination of Polish currency has a different monarch on it. In Romania, the 100 leu has one of their queens on it. You get the idea. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, I just think it's an interesting cultural observation. One that would make a great Eeveelution. This is Zarion. They kind of look like they're based on a specific historical figure, but they aren't. They're more of a generic amalgamation of the concept of an Eastern European king. The reference image is of, I think, Ivan Vladislav of Bulgaria, but it's not specifically him. There's a ton of different inspirations here. Like, the helmet has a little cross on it meant to look like an Eastern European crucifix. The tail has the double-headed eagle of Constantinople on it. The staff is based on the scepter of the Polish monarchy, and they're green because, at least amongst geography nerds like me, green is a color associated with the Russian Empire. I could have made them purple because of Constantinople, but I feel like green works a little better, so maybe the purple version can be the shiny. Oh, fuck, I didn't talk about any of the shinies for these, did I? There. Actually, despite just being hue shifted, most of them look okay. Anyways, the cultural artifact that evolves them is the Globus Cruciger, that is what the actual name of holy hand grenades are. Thank you very much. They are a steel dragon type because Vlad the Impaler was also referred to as a dragon, so it basically accounts. And specifically, this Eevee's playstyle is meant to reflect a particular legend about Russian kings that, like, they'll defend their kingdom until the bitter end. So they're entirely defensive and don't have any, like, attacking moves. They're just meant to sustain themselves, either for in a single battle where you just have to swap them out to get other members healed, or in a double battle, they'll actively take damage for the other one you have in your party. And next is Scandinavia, because that's the next one I drew. Now, I actually had some insider information when it comes to Scandinavian culture because, well, I dated a Swedish guy. So I'm readily aware of all of Scandinavian culture and its exports, and especially how much influence they had on America during the early 2000s. I mean, think about it. Norway made the What Does the Fox Say video, Sweden made the Crazy Frog and Caramel Dance music videos, Denmark made Legos, Iceland made EVE Online, Finland did the Moomins, which is more of a European early 2000s thing, but for Americans, they also did the Levin Polka, and then Estonia made Skype, so yeah, it's kind of because of Scandinavia that the early 2000s was the way it was. But I'm not going to do a Skype-themed Eevee, so what do I do for Scandinavian culture? Lego Dragon! Lego Dragon! Lego Dragon! Well, that was my first idea anyway. Yeah, but it turns out that Digimon kind of beat me to the punch, and Toy Agumon's a thing, and he's a Lego dragon, so... I mean, to any Digimon fans in the back, well, first, you're in constant pain, but second, you saw that coming from a mile away. So I can't make it a Lego dragon because if Pokemon were to ever rip off Digimon, then the franchise would completely fucking collapse. So what do I do instead? What's more Scandinavian than Lego? Death metal! This is an Eeveelution based on death metal. Obviously, it had to be Dark Electric type. That's just too perfect. I named it Vargion after Varg Skeletor, aka Joel from Vinesauce. He's kind of the only Scandinavian death metal artist I know of. I'm not actually that familiar with the genre, but if you are more familiar, feel free to leave some names in the comments. The artifact that evolves them is a Dolahorse, which that doesn't really have anything to do with death metal, but it's Scandinavian. And this is around the time when I started actually considering the shinies for these. So the shiny type for this one, the default one is the Swedish colors, so obviously the shiny type had to be the Norwegian colors. It has a special ability named Rock Out, which would, I imagine it would give them a stat buff after any noise-based move was used on them, so this thing shreds through Noiverns. And that's basically it. I really didn't think about the moves all too much. I just kind of went through the Bulbapedia list of Pokemon moves and chose the ones that kind of sounded like death metal albums. And the final part of Europe, and the entire old world continent, as it were, is Western Europe. This was not the hardest region to come up with a good design for. That's coming later. But it was pretty hard to get like a strong idea for this region. Now, my first idea was actually to do a food-based Pokemon, like Alcremie or Vanillite, except this time with a Belgian waffle. But I realized that the only way I could incorporate that in an Eevee design would be if it was around their neck, and I already kind of blew a circular thing around the neck for Yapsion, and I didn't want to repeat that. So my new idea ended up being cat in a boat. This is Marinion. Okay, I put a little bit more nuance into it than that. This design is actually based on the early modern period of Europe. So the boat is actually a caravel from Portugal, and the armor that it's wearing is more or less designed off of mercenaries from the Holy Roman Empire. So he's got a kettle helm, a red coif, a red puffy sleeves on the breastplate, and his tail has a little flag on it because he is a boat boy. They have a special move called Trade League based on the Hanseatic Trade League, obviously. I think the way that would work is be a combination of like Payday and Fly, so they disappear off the battlefield for a little bit and make money whilst they're gone. And now the artifact that evolves them, I wrote down that it's a longsword, but whilst I was just sitting here recording the audio, I thought of an even better one. A pear-flavored candy. So, limes aren't actually native to Europe, so whenever you see a green candy, it's gonna be pear-flavored, or maybe green apple, but usually pear. And there is nothing funnier than seeing, like, a Mexican grab for the imported candies, then they grab a green candy thinking it's lime, and it's pear, and just the palpable disappointment in their face. It is so funny. The only thing funnier is when a European goes to grab a green candy thinking it's pear, and it's lime, and it's way more sour than they were expecting. And yeah, that's basically it. Oh wait, no, it's not basically it. I forgot I'm still talking about the shinies. So the shiny for this one is French. Okay, now I think that's actually it. And now since we're done with Europe, you'd assume the next continent we're going to do is the Americas, right? No. Welcome to the land of no civilization, no permanent population, no countries, No landmarks, no history, no people. Ever since the 1500s, cartographers have been speculating that potentially there could be a continent at the bottom of the world, but it wasn't until the 1900s that any human voyaged beyond the coastline. No attempt has been made to set up any permanent civilization or colonize this land. Wikipedia has a list of places in Antarctica. The first entry is ice. Actually, that's kind of fucking hilarious. Due to the inhuman and mysterious nature of Antarctica, it has become the setting for many a horror author's story. The 1957 film, The Land Unknown, speculates that underneath the ice is a hidden jungle in which prehistoric life from before humanity has thrived and continues to live on. The 1999 novel Atlantis Found by Clive Cussler is about how after World War II, the German Third Reich fled to the continent, setting up a nanotech research lab to one day overthrow the democratic world order. And finally, the master of cosmic horror himself, H.P. Lovecraft, set his story at the Mountains of Madness in the frozen wasteland. Lovecraft's story is partially a continuation of an Edgar Allan Poe book. However, differences begin to arise when the main characters find carcasses of strange creatures never seen by humanity before. Well, at least they thought they were carcasses. Sorry, was something scary supposed to happen? Whoops. I was just sitting here waiting for this bit to end. I see you've already met the next Eeveelution. Don't worry, they don't bite. They don't have teeth. This is Abomination. Great name, I know. And despite the fact they're based on an H.P. Lovecraft monster, I tried my best to make them cute. I failed, but I tried. So this monster's not even a Pokemon. This monster's shtick is that it's pretending to be an Eevee, probably to lure in some Pokemon trainers that want to catch it. Initially, I was going to make it an ice flying type because it's in Antarctica and cold, but then I went on the Pokemon Wiki, or Bulbapedia, and I saw that question mark was a type, and I was just like, yes, that's perfect. Besides, I reserved ice flying for the next Eeveelution we're going to be talking about, which I promise will be much more pleasant. The Americas, the final frontier. And for suspense purposes, I'm going to go south to north. So we're starting off with South America, or Patria Grande do Sul, because I was feeling cultured when I made this map. And when I was planning this video out in my head, just trying to figure out what designs I could do for each region, this is one of the first ones I came up with a good, solid idea for. So a not insignificant amount of these designs are vaguely based on historical figures. So for this one, I wanted to do a little bit of the opposite and base this design on a contemporary figure. One who I think will have some long-lasting presence in South American culture. That being esteemed athlete Lionel Messi, the star player of the FIFA 2022 World Cup. Now it could be tricky arbitrarily deciding on which contemporary figures are going to be remembered long-lastingly and even favorably, but I feel like Lionel Messi is a safe enough pick. So this is Del Sulion. That name was more of a work-in-progress title, but I ended up liking it enough over any other picks that it made to the final product. Design-wise, he obviously has Lionel Messi influence with the soccer ball and the jersey, but also, as you can see, he's based off an Andean condor. And because of that condor influence, he has a special move called Plop, which is a reference to a Chilean comic strip called Condorito, in which every issue ends with someone falling over and it making an iconic plop sound. Not sure what it would really do as a move in a Pokemon game. I guess it could the damaging move that prevents them from taking a second turn, sometimes, I guess. The artifact that evolves them is a Telstar Ball, which is the name for the specific design of soccer ball that has the black hexagons and the white octagons. Oh, I'm sorry. I meant football, not soccer. And the shiny for this one's actually pretty simple. The only thing I changed was the jersey. So instead of being the Argentine national football team, it's the Barcelona Football Club, which is Lionel Messi's domestic team. Initially, I wanted the colors to be yellow and blue for Boca because Pokemon was a really cool pun in my head, but alas, Lionel Messi didn't actually play for the Boca Juniors. It would not have actually made any sense, even though it is admittedly an amazing pun. And next, we're off to Central America, and this design, this was trickier. One of my first ideas was to have the Eevee of this region be a duende, which is kind of like a gnome or goblin-like creature. And as much as I actually like that idea still, I also understand that it's very hard since the duende is not a very well-known creature. It's going to be hard for me to conjure its specific image in the imagination with a design. I also didn't want to do two contemporaries in a row because, well, duendes are real. That's undisputable. So I came up with a second idea, and I didn't like the second idea at first, but then I drew it and fell absolutely in love with it. This is Cornucopion, and as you can tell from the name, he's a cornucopia mixed with an armadillo. Now in the modern day, I feel like cornucopias are most associated with either the Hunger Games or Thanksgiving, but before that, it was actually a symbol representing republicanism, specifically in Gran Colombia and Central America. So I took a cornucopia and turned it into the shell of an armadillo. I probably don't have to explain what an armadillo is. I know one of you watching is an armadillo. The artifact that evolves them, I wrote that it's an eagle fighting a snake atop a cactus, and yeah, that's the symbol on Mexico's flag, but more specifically, it's a reference to the foundational story of Mexico City itself, where an Aztec god created this symbol to guide the indigenous people to find the best spot to place the capital city of their new empire, the Aztec Empire as it would be. And for the shiny, I wanted to reflect less Mexican and more Central American culture, so the shiny is blue with a white stripe in the middle, which is how the flags of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua look. Again, this is another simple design, but I actually think the simple designs are my favorite out of the bunch, and not just because they were the easiest to draw. No, I think they're just good. And the next continent up is the Caribbean. If that sounds unnatural, it's because I've been pronouncing it Caribbean my entire life. And this was a region I had absolutely no idea what to do with first. Immediately, I know I didn't want to do a pirate-themed one, not only because I did a seafaring Eevee already, but because I feel like these designs are a great way to indicate more niche parts of culture, and everyone knows Pirates of the Caribbean, everyone knows the Republic of Pirates. It's the funnest of fun facts. However, don't you worry, because this design is still wearing a tri-corner hat. Introducing Revolution, the best name so far, and they're based on the historical figure Toussaint Louverture, the leader of the Haitian Revolution. If you're unfamiliar, the country we call Haiti in the modern day used to be a French colony named Saint-Domingue. The colony enslaved West Africans and forced them to produce coffee for mainland France. However, as the French Empire was experiencing some turbulence, the enslaved people saw an opportunity to gain their freedom and revolted. Slowly, the disorganized chapters of the revolution gathered around a man named Toussaint Louverture, who was not only able to seize the whole colony, but opened up negotiations with France for independence. It wouldn't be until after his death that Haiti became a fully fledged state, but without him, it never would have. And his revolution would serve as an inspiration to other colonies that maybe too one day they could achieve independence. Which is why his special ability is called Legacy of Hope. Now, you remember how Timurion's special ability was called Legacy of Fear? I wanted to contrast the two Eeveelutions based on historical figures. Tamerlane's genocide did irreparable damage to the Middle East to the point where in the modern day we're still feeling the effects of the military campaigns that were carried out in the 1400s. Conversely, it's because of Toussaint Louverture's revolution that many former colonies were able to achieve independence. And I want the takeaway from that to be that for every monster in history, there's a hero, there's someone willing to do good as well. It can be depressing reading history because of all the terrible things that have happened to humanity, but we also wouldn't have gotten to this far if it weren't for good people, if it weren't for good moral people. But my philosophical waxing about great man theory aside, the artifact that evolves Revolution is a pop Jawa CD. A pop Jawa is a genre of music in Suriname, and the reason I picked it is because I really like it. I went through this phase where I was listening to radio stations from all around the world, and I love listening to Surinamese radio stations because, Surinamese people are fucking lucky. They're living in a timeline where every single pop band is the Beach Boys before Summer in Paradise. Fucking Surinamese, they're eating good in the music genre. I'm jealous. And the shiny, I kind of only really had one idea for the shiny. It was to make them red and black to reflect the Duvalier regime, aka the regime of Papa Doc, the voodoo dictator. Kind of doesn't gel in the slightest with the rest of the design, but I'd have no other ideas. So yeah, this segment was tonally all over the goddamn place. Let's just say there was some mounting pressure from the next upcoming design. And now it's time for the final cultural continent. I've saved this one for last because 1, it's my homeland, and 2, remember when I was talking about the Western European design and I said that it wasn't the hardest one? Yeah, that's because this one was. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, Fifi, you live here. It can't be that hard to come up with a good design. Yeah, that's what I thought fucking too. There were multiple things that made this hard. The first one was that for all the other cultural continents, there were like 5 or 6 countries I could pull different ideas from. But for this one, there's only 2. 2.5 if you count Quebec. But even then, I could only pull from one because, if you're not aware, there's a Canadian culture YouTuber named JJ Makulo who did an entire book explaining Canadian culture through the usage of fake Pokemon. And there's just no way I'm competing with that. There's no way you can make a more Canadian fake Pokemon than Nanaimo Bear. So alright, I can only pull cultural cues from the United States. Alright. Second issue. For every country I've talked about before this, they've all had their folklore. They've had their, mythical figures, their legends, all that stuff. And America has that too. They have folklore, they have stories about heroes, but usually those stories are copyrighted. Obviously, I don't have statistics, but I'd argue 80% of American culture are owned by 5 or 6 companies. Which is worrying, but I'm not here to think through the implications of that. And I knew all of this going in. And that's why I saved America for last, because I was absolutely dreading doing this design. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's a figure from American pop culture that isn't copyrighted? Because at first I thought to myself, hey, what if I did Hank Hill? He's the most stereotypical American possible. But nope, he's copyrighted. And my idea after that was to do a grass fairy type based on Bigfoot, but how the fuck do I turn a bipedal ape into a quadrupedal cat? I was struggling. This is not easy in the slightest. And then something hit me. For all these designs, I've basically only been doing civilian culture. I've done historical figures who are popular with civilianry. I've done forms of art that are popular with civilianry. I've done just vague symbols that civilians use. I've done tchotchkes and other fun stuff that are recognizable to civilianry. And with Balanion, I just did the civilians themselves. But I'd argue, America isn't known for its civilians. It's most known for its military. I avoided using a lot of military symbols for other nations because, whilst things like national cuisine and what a country's official language is, that can get political, but a military is only political. There's no non-political way to view a military, and most countries have varying different relationships with their military, and most of them aren't positive. Just off the top of my head, Costa Rica, Thailand, Germany, Burkina Faso, Turkey, and Venezuela, the military over there is usually an active political force, if not an outright political party. They're not seen as a shield you can hide behind, they're seen as something that protects you for a cost. In fact, Costa Rica got rid of their military because they didn't think that the protection they were getting from them was worth the political turmoil it was causing. And in a lot of countries, like just recently Sudan and Gabon, the military supersedes the needs of the judiciary. But despite how powerful the American military is, easily being the most powerful organization on the planet, they've never attempted to overthrow Senate or Congress, which I find weird. Obviously, I'm glad they haven't, but it's still weird to think about. I think it's a unique privilege most Americans don't even think about. Like, the Democrats and the Republicans don't have to make concessions to the military to enact policies. In other countries, they would have to do that. And even when Donald Trump attempted to throw a coup, he didn't have the support of the military. The only organization supporting him was QAnon. And honestly, trying to overthrow a country with QAnon is like trying to rob a Walmart with a screaming crackhead. It's not gonna happen. What the fuck was he thinking? So you get where I'm going with this. The American military plays an important part in American culture that I don't think is replicated in any other country. Which is why I've opted to make the Eeveelution that represents America Tankion! What else could you want? It's an Eevee combined with a tank. It's giant. It's made of metal. A steel type. Please don't question why the tank has an Air Force roundel on it. It's taken me until now to realize that that makes no fucking sense. So, okay, other than it being a tank, the other cultural cues are that it's flying two flags. The American flag, obviously, but also the POW MIA flag. It was a flag made around the Vietnam War era that was meant to commemorate those who died in war and their bodies weren't able to be found, either because they were detained by enemy forces or they just went missing and we don't know what happened to them. It's a solidarity flag that's sometimes flown on government buildings, sometimes not. It's kind of a political thing whether or not it is or isn't. The artifact that evolves them is a field cross, which, much like the POW MIA flag, is a sign of solidarity with soldiers. It also is on a flag. It's on the Lest They Be Forgotten flag, which is kind of like the POW MIA flag of my generation, the post 9/11 generation. And I haven't been talking about the height or weight stats because I mostly just made those the same as other Eevees, like 2 to 3 feet. But for this one, I made it 13 feet tall because it's a tank, but also the original 13 colonies and 13 stripes on the American flag. And it is 1776 pounds because that is the foundational year of the Union. I get that means it's the heaviest ones. Have your jokes in the comments. We all think you're very hilarious. They got a special move called Freedom Fighter, which I definitely know what it does. It is a friendship-based move that does more damage the higher your friendship rating with it is. Yeah, sure, why not? And the shiny. Oh yeah, the shiny is what I love. The shiny's just camouflage. Initially, I was going to just make the regular design camouflage, but I felt like it was a little too gaudy for the regular design. But for the shiny, it's perfectly fine. I get this segment was a little more confrontational and aggressive than the rest of the segments, but it's hard not to be a little bit testosterone filled when you're talking about the military and you're talking about the troops and honor. Oorah. Ow, that hurt. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you for watching. This video is a massive undertaking, but I love it for the fact that it combined my two interests of geography and character design. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. I'm all ears, and I solely make YouTube videos for the joy of making art and being able to reach out to other people. And if you like my designs, thank you, and you can take them. Please, take one. I didn't realize how many cats I made until it was too late. I can't take care of them all. Please, take one.